Exciting.
Good evening, folks. This is The Weird Part, and I am your host, Vincent Treatwell. I have a very special guest tonight, Stacy Schuerman, who is a spiritualist minister, medium, healer, and teacher. She's very unique to anybody we've had on the show, and welcome.
Thank you.
Minister Schuerman.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I am super excited to talk about at least, things that I believe in my perspective that maybe others kind of do or don't. But I'd love to always share it, at least in my human experience, for sure. So thanks for having me.
Oh, more than welcome. I was really pleased that you agreed to come on.
Absolutely. Well, I think a lot of this stuff it's always been fascinating to me, so it's it's always fun to share.
I was reading a lot about the Spiritualist Church
Yeah.
and didn't know that really there was a congregation meeting a few miles down the road from my house. And so I said, in addition to doing the reading, why don't you go see what these people are about? And it's been absolutely fascinating. And whatever else happens, I've certainly had some intense experiences there. And I mean that only in a good way. It's been really quite something. And, I haven't been any place like that. I can say there's nothing like next to this. It's one of a kind.
There you go. That's it. It is one of a kind. It's kind of how I even, the story of how I came into that church and to be part of really the spiritualist movement, right? Or spiritualism, depending on, how you talk about it. How I even came into that was very unusual too. And it was shocking to me. I traveled all the way to the East Coast to find spiritualism, to find out that literally in my backyard was a spiritualist church. And not only is there a spiritualist church in Milwaukee, but there is the correspondence school for spiritualism is in Milwaukee also. So,
wow.
Yeah.
In fact, now that you mention it, yes, I have heard of that. I don't have any experience with it, but yes.
Yeah. So it was fascinating to go all the way out to New York to discover spiritualism, to come back to my home state and realize it's right in my backyard.
That is it's a fascinating turn of events.
Absolutely.
How did you get interested in this?
So interesting enough, I'll tell you a little bit, well, probably a little bit more than maybe you want to know about my background, only because it's a story I love to share. Becoming a spiritualist that I am now, that I identify as now, came to me about maybe 13 to 16 years ago. However, I think it was a life journey, to be honest, because, when I was in kindergarten and living like the perfect kindergartner life, I had experience with my grandfather who passed away to spirit. I had a conversation with him while he was, not only in coma, but while he made his transition to the next life, right? And so I kind of always grew up with this slight awareness. And I really don't believe in, what is the word? Irony, synchronicity. I think everything kind of has a grand master plan, right?
Not, in other words, not blind coincidence.
Right, not blind coincidence. Well, when I was 11, my parents purchased one of the most haunted restaurants in Wisconsin. And so I started observing paranormal experience. And then with paranormal investigators, as I got older, my parents were like, they didn't want to stay with the paranormal investigators overnight, but I would. So I kind of was fascinated by, religion, for one, and then this paranormal for two. And I guess I never say never, right? Like we really just don't know a lot of what I think we want to know. Right?
Yes, indeed. And I'll be honest, when I was writing this up, I was very cautious to not push the paranormal aspect too hard because I never want to offend. I don't want to invite somebody on my show and then offend them,
Right.
But,
right.
But obvious, I have a great and deep interest in the paranormal. And I
Well,
didn't want to come off like I was treating your religion like just another paranormal phenomena. But I'm glad you're interested in it too, so we can talk about it.
yeah. Well, and what's interesting is what I find out now, like when I think about the spiritualist movement and I learn about it and our roots, right? Like the roots of how we became who we were. A lot of it was this idea of proving the continuity of life. And how do we prove that continuity? Well, through paranormal investigation, through mediumship. It's semantics of words, really, is all it is. Um, but yeah, so I watched all forms of paranormal groups come in, and what I found interesting about it was I fell more towards those who are doing the scientific aspect of the paranormal, so like EVPs and temperature changes and all of the things versus mediumship. Ironically, that was like, yeah, I don't know, like, okay, but yeah, but when you can watch the temperature in a room change by like 10-20 degrees with no reason why, that's like, wow, right?
That is impressive. Yes.
Yeah. And I never thought that for me, I never was fearful of being in my parents' restaurant. Like I knew there was activity, I knew there was energy. I didn't think people were like stuck or banished to the earth plane, waiting for someone to rescue them. I just felt like they lived simultaneously right next to us side by side in their world next to our world. And it was through that a customer came to me. Oh, I don't even know. I had to have been probably 2021, maybe 22 at the time, and said, hey, have you ever heard of this community that talks to the dead? Um, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, yeah, I saw this HBO special, No One Dies in Lilydale, and it's all these people who talk to the dead. And I'm like, well, where is that? And why aren't we going? Like, let's get in the car. And
If I may just interrupt you
yeah,
for a second, haunted restaurant. Do you mind? I
yeah,
don't. You don't have to name it if you don't want to.
yeah. Well, it's
Could you tell me a
Chances.
little?
It's Chances is the name, and it's been the name for 30 plus years. That's how long my parents have owned it. Um, but it's in like the Haunted Wisconsin book, and it was called the Union House originally. It's on the Fox River. It's southeastern Wisconsin. It was in here again, irony. It was built in 1848 or 1838, but what was funny is 1848 is the advent of modern spiritualism. So I find that fun. Um, it was always open to the public. It was built as a stage stop, or like it as a purpose, because between Racine and Janesville, this restaurant was located on what we would have considered back then I-94 of today, right? So
Okay.
hundreds of stagecoaches, and it has a really amazing history. Like it has a spring-loaded dance floor on the second floor. It's like the last one in the state now. I think the few restaurants or bowling alleys or public spaces that had them have now burnt. Um, it's said that it's part of the Underground Railroad,
Oh.
and there's been, the basement is creepy. I will give you that, like on a human level, it is creepy. Um, and it's fascinating, like it wouldn't be uncommon to be working, and yes, things happen late at night, but I think there's a reason for that. I think the fact that, the physical world quiets and darkens and dims down, which allows us to be more aware of both the spiritual world around us and the physical world around us. But like people would be sober and just sitting at the bar and be like, the kitchen door just opened and closed. And we're like, oh yeah, like just no big deal. Like, oh yeah, the lights would go off, things would fly off the wall. It had all forms of different, people would see people up in the second floor window and no one's in the second floor anymore. Like, just all those really good things.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, and I got to experience some really cool, like EVP is probably one of my most favorite.
Okay.
I don't know what you would call them, paranormal tools.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good term. Yeah. The
Yeah,
the scientific. instruments that they use to try to at least measure side effects, or get some kind of technological measurement, I guess you'd say, the closest thing to it I
Yeah.
could call it.
Yeah. And so like I think it's like electronic voice something projection or something, but it was always fascinating to me. They would always have, some of the groups would have me actually ask the questions, because they would say that the spirits were very used to hearing my voice, which now makes sense on a mediumistic standpoint, right? Like at first I'm like, okay, whatever, I don't get it. And then like once I developed mediumship more, or I think I've been always kind of mediumistic, but I you have to like unfold it, you have to develop it, it's a strength. I think we all have the ability. um then I realized, oh, now I get why they asked me to ask the question.
Because they were familiar with you. Is that the
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
pretty much. Like I was a common energy, or common, vibrational rate that they were used to in the space that we shared. Because that's what I really feel like it is too, Vincent. I feel like we're sharing space. It's like I don't feel like heaven's far, 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 far away. I feel like it's right next to us, and we share space in our entire existence, no matter if we're in the physical or if we're in the spiritual expression of ourselves.
Wow, that is a fascinating concept. That's like right next door. And it's not hard to cross.
Right.
That the
Right.
veil isn't as thick as we think it is.
Well, and hence that kind of philosophy, that talk of the lowering of the veil. In many different religions, they talk about that, right? Like there's many different theories about how, but yet somehow in our human mind, we have constructed that they're super far away from us,
Mhm.
and separate from us, and anything that we can do to divide ourselves from them, right? Because
Mhm.
of their physical existence not being around anymore. But I think that's the biggest illusion, that idea of separation. I think it's,
That is interesting. Yeah, that is very interesting.
yeah,
And people all around the world, all different societies, have always been able to contact those who are not physically present. And it's a
absolutely.
universal phenomena. And there's many different ways to do it, but it's something that like virtually every culture's done. And that
Yeah.
tells me that there's something there. Okay, it's not
Yeah.
just wishful thinking. That it's quite real.
Yeah. Since the beginning of man, really, right? Like
Yes.
since the beginning of man, how can we deny things? But I think too, so much of what we're dealing with when we talk about all of this is that kind of unseen aspect. We're living in such a tangible human existence.
Mhm.
So if we can't touch it, feel it, dissect it, you know, uh logical, equational it out, it doesn't really exist, which is really bizarre.
Yes, yes. Well, and I
Because
often see them as being you have polar opposites, but they're really a lot the same. You
yeah.
have fundamentalist religion that tells you you shall not talk to the dead. That's a big
Hmm.
wrong thing. And then you have materialist science that says you have no soul. You're meat walking around, and when you have your last breath, that's it, game over. And there's nothing more to you. That's it.
Yeah.
And they're both very dogmatic. They believe different things, but it seems like they kind of believe what they believe for the same reasons and are mirror images of each other when it comes to the dogmatism.
Yeah.
I, that's how I see it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I was listening to something as a while back, and I think it was Christopher Hitchens who was, deriding anything that's not literally physical. And he was just sure you do not have a soul. I'm like, okay. You can argue to me about God and the different meanings of God
Right.
and the whole concept of God. But how do you know I don't have a soul? You don't know that, dude. There's no way that you could know that. You're
Right.
just presuming and putting your force of personality into your chosen belief. But that's no more valid than anything. That's not provable. That's certainly not proven. No, it's
Right.
nonsense.
Well, and
And
you know what,
you know,
and that what you're talking about too, like for me anyways, at least in my experience, again, not going to the extreme aspect, right? But growing up, being raised Catholic and being, brought up in a pretty open-minded family. And then being able to express not only the spiritual aspect of myself, but the physical aspect, logic, all of that. It's hard for me. Well, it's not even hard for me. I will never say that there's not an afterlife. I've had way too many experiences that has become my truth, but yet I still allow people their own space to find their own truth. But when you look at all of the millions of people, and I say millions, right? Because like you said, think of the world. We only tend to think of our state, our tiny town that we live in, or our belief system right here, when we're part of a gargantuan world who have had near death experiences or have had a ghostly visit or had, and all their stories are the similar.
Mhm.
Like it's not these whacked out weird, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh
how
yes,
can you
there's a real
discredit any of that?
similarity. Yes,
Yeah,
that goes all around the world. That goes all into unrelated cultures, and that goes back as far as we can go back, and further than that, because we find prehistoric relics that seem like they were doing contact with the departed. And
exactly.
that seems there's I can't think of a human society that didn't do some of that, that didn't do something like that. And
Exactly.
we don't do all that for nothing. There's something there to it.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yep.
I cut you off kind of when we were
That's all
talking
right.
about the haunted restaurant. What happened after that?
Oh, so I go to Lilydale. So let me tell you about Lilydale, New York for a minute, only because it's playing a big part in my life now.
Oh yes.
But it played a big part in my life, whatever, 15, 16 years ago. So so I'll talk for a minute about the modern spiritualist movement, right? Or modern spiritualism. Because if you look up spiritualism, like you were just saying, Vincent, like it's as long as we know man has walked this earth, there has been some form of communication to the spiritual realm, either through deceased loved ones, through prophecy, through angels, guides, masters, gods, goddesses, whatever it is. There's been some sort of spiritual communication. But the reason we talk about modern spiritualism is because that's kind of where we feel the two worlds combined it. I remember how I said we share space, like it's not separate
Mhm.
from. Like
Yes.
we talk a lot about the event of Hydesville, March 31st, 1848, where these three sisters and their mother lived in a house, rented a house in Hydesville, New York, where there were rappings. And actually, someone told me one time they believe the Fox sisters are the first paranormal investigators.
That is a very good description. Yes. That
And
makes a
I
lot of
thought,
sense.
that kind of makes sense because there was rappings on like the wall, like knock, knock, knock. And they communicated with the rappings to prove that whatever energy or whoever was rapping was intelligent. So they would say, like, repeat, do what I do. And they would like clap their hands, but not even clap them, just like this, where like there's the gap where they're not really, and the number of raps would correspond to the fake claps. And
Wow.
so they proved that there was this intelligence, right? And from that started this movement basically. Again, look at the time frame and look at the space. You're looking Western New York. A lot of different religions were forming in that. They call it the burned over district. Mormonism, New Thought, Quakers, and Shakers, all of those kinds of things were kind of stemming and starting in this. And modern spiritualism became the science, philosophy, and religion basically of continuous life. So as spiritualists, we believe in a God source, right? What that is and how we're going to define it is going to be, probably a little different. And we believe that we're continuous, that this existence is just a blimp in our entire existence. And so that we continue after the change called death. And this is where mediumship comes in, this proof of continuity, right? Like being able to communicate. And this is where women, particularly mostly women, but some men in that time started to communicate with spirit loved ones and bring forth messages from people who were living in the spiritual realm to the people who were grieving in the physical realm. And so this community, this Lilydale, New York, started back then of a bunch of, I mean, really, we were radical thinkers, right? We were all about, I mean, they put women in control. We had men, like, don't get us wrong. It wasn't like just a woman-based thing, but women were as equal to men, which was a radical thought idea in
Oh, in the 1840s, that
1850s,
was unheard
60s,
of. Yes.
70s, exactly. Um,
Women
and
didn't get the right to vote for over another half century. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And actually, some of those women who campaigned in Lilydale, New York. Susan B. Anthony spoke there because the spiritualist community would give people the platform. Same thing with the abolishing of slavery. That was also like very much our thing. We were all like, but we're all creations of God. Like we didn't, again, we were trying to basically, to me, prove the idea of that false separation, that ideology that we're separate from. We were trying to prove, we're all still here. And so I went to the town. I watched mediumship demonstrated as a religious practice. I watched people get messages from loved ones that brought them inspiration, joy, or comfort through their grief. And I just thought, whatever this is, I need this. Like this, it felt like I found a piece of my soul in that little town. And so I came back to Wisconsin where I found that church and where I found the education of the Morris Pratt Institute. And I got my credentialing, and I'm proud to say I'm a spiritualist. I'm proud to say that I practice as my philosophy of life, as my religion, spiritualism, knowing that one, religion is man-made. Two, philosophy is a great discussion of learning and about life, and science is real, right? Like, so
Yes.
so all of this made sense to me, and that's how I found this, and I found my own connection to spirit, so I can do mediumship for others and do healings and just share, like I said in the beginning, it's what I love to do, right? Is just share. And I have had some wild experiences.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. Um, I I definitely want to ask you about some of those in, as we go on.
Yeah.
Um, would you say that growing up Catholic, the practice of appealing to saints maybe made it easier to accept talking to the departed than, for example, I grew up in the Satanic Panic and in a Protestant church that it was basically, I've never done any of this stuff because of just straight fear. Okay.
Sure.
And even after I left that and left that belief system, I was, there's still a lot of paranoia about, I've never talked with an entity.
Yeah.
And because it's just, I mean, it's a big deal for me because so much was drummed in that, everything is demons basically.
Yeah.
And that, it seems like that'd be the hardest upbringing to come out of and end up in spiritualism. Maybe Catholicism would be a little more open-minded.
Well, I think, I mean, to your point, and what I'm hearing you say is I absolutely agree in a certain way with that. Like you said, when it is ingrained in you that talking to, the dead is impossible. And the only time you talk to the dead would be talking to the devil. Like, no matter how old we are, we still can't, it takes so much to like untrain our subconscious, right? Like,
Yes,
I
yes, indeed.
yeah. And for me, I kind of was brought up in a Baptist church for a very short period of time. I was baptized Catholic and started attending Catholic school in kindergarten, first grade. So I grew up all of that, went to private school, right, up until high school. Um, and I think, no one has ever asked this question. And so I am like loving this because it made me go in and self-reflect. And I really think, in a way, yes, it did make it easier because I subscribe to this idea of angels or saints or, heaven. Like, it being a beautiful place and being able to commune. Like, I could ask the angels to watch over me. I could ask my loved ones to pay attention to me or to help me through a situation. Knowing that I wasn't getting scolded. Now, on the other hand, don't eat meat during Lent on a Friday. Like, I had my own
Yes,
Catholic guilt,
yes.
right? Like, I have
Uh-huh.
my own little bits of fear. But I think in a way it might have. And the fact that, like, I remember, I think it was like my junior year of high school, when you're a teenager and think you know everything. Um, my mom was having priests over for dinner, and I had been blessed to really have some great discussions. I don't think most people get to have,
Mhm.
about, like, well, come on now. Like, God really came down and said you're going to hell if you eat meat. Like, when it's been proven that this was a discussion to help these people, to help these people, you know,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and and I was able to have those kind of conversations. And I ended up also seeking out a bunch of different religions. I mean, probably from 17 to 22, I had been to almost any church, even some of, like, where you came from, and trying to figure out where I fit. And here's what I do know: when you are in any church, temple, synagogue, whatever it is, wherever, you know, congregants or community engage is really church, and you're truly in a place of love and prayer, it feels wonderful. But,
And if I can just chime in,
yeah,
I have had that experience with um a very ultra conservative, like right wing Pentecostal church, but the common people there were good people. And when we came together, there was a vibe that was really great, you know.
yeah,
And it's something that's, separate from the rules that you can't have a TV, and all that sort of thing. It's
yeah.
very separate. And the leadership was very different than the congregants, and very much
Well,
so.
and right there, what you're saying, exactly. It's the leadership. It's those people picked or chosen by other humans to run that is what, mm, can be misleading or harmful or whatever the word. I mean, to me, I think as long as I have the right to pray to my own God and do my own thing, and you have your right, I'm just gonna, talk about what I know from my experience, and
Mhm.
most religions, this is what was so important about spiritualism too, right? And mediumship. Because most religions, besides maybe 2 or 3%, because I think you have your good, non-believers, right, of afterlife agnostics, or
Mhm.
now agnostics, okay, but like atheists, right? Like, we don't have,
Mhm.
where there's nothing. We just go from dirt,
Mhm.
dirt to dirt. I have a funny story. Can I digress for a
Oh,
minute?
yes, please. That's what
Funny
we do
me
here.
Funny mediumship story. I was giving a reading to a woman. I was out on the West Coast serving a spiritualist camp, and I was giving a reading. This woman booked a reading with me, and I'm sitting there, and I connect to her father. But her father's standing there. Now, I'm clairvoyant, which means I see things in my mind, right? I see images or people or scenarios in my mind. And I'm seeing a man and I can describe him to a T, how tall he is, what his weight looks like, how he's dressed, what his hair looks like. And he's literally standing in a black void. And he's sitting there saying, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so, happy as a lark, happy as a lark. And I say this to her and I said, and and he's giving me this name and I can't remember. It was really an unusual name, like not like a Tom or, a
Hmm.
Harry or Jim, right? It was a
Hmm.
real unique name. And she goes, oh my God, that's my dad. And I said, why is he so proud to tell you he told you so? Like, that's all he's saying to me. And he's happy as a lark. And she says, because he was an atheist. And
So he went to literally where he thought he was going to, which was nowhere. But yet he hasn't noticed the fact that, well, you shouldn't exist, but
he's
he
happy as
does.
a lark. Like he was
And
just happy as can be. He didn't need to move on to the light or anything. He could probably live eternity just being right.
everybody's heaven may be very different,
Exactly.
very
Exactly.
individual. Yes, yes.
Oh
Wow,
goodness.
that is interesting. Wow.
Sorry, I had to digress.
No,
But
no, that
anyway,
that's good.
spiritualism was made not to really even become its own religion. The only reason it really did that, and we admit it, we openly admit it, is to protect the mediums because we were getting arrested for fortune telling and all of this stuff. Like, they were comparing us to, the Wiccan or the witchcraft era. Again, not that that doesn't mean that doesn't have communicating with spirit, but that's not what we do. We prove the continuity by, tuning into people's loved ones. Um, and so spiritualism and mediumship was actually meant to enhance all religions by proving the afterlife.
That makes
Because
a lot of sense. Yes, you
yeah.
once you establish that, then you've established a basis for a whole lot of things. And I mean, that's without diminishing any other doctrines. I mean, that's the name of the game. Do you
Mhm.
survive this life or not? And if so, in what form? And yeah, that's hugely important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, wow, I was just thinking of what you were saying earlier about spiritualists were big in the movement for women's equality and in abolitionism and in a lot of progressive causes. And I was thinking of a spiritualist minister, Charles Murray Spear, who left the Universalist Church and became a spiritualist
Yeah.
and was a huge figure for a time. And that absolutely, his story absolutely fascinated me. But it also fascinated me that in the regular secular world, he was a big deal. He was considered the first probation officer because he would bail out poor defendants and tell the court, don't keep this man in jail. I will supervise him. I'll make sure that he cleans up his act and gets a job and stops drinking or does whatever he's supposed to do. But leave him under my care rather than just locking him up behind bars. And that was a very progressive idea in a pre-Civil War era. And
Yeah.
I've noticed a long ongoing chain of spiritualists being on the right side of history. And that does not seem to be an accident to me. That they were kind of being led in a certain direction, several directions, and they were all very positive causes.
You're touching now on a pulse that I just love, and that's the history. I don't think you will find a state, a city, a county within a state where a spiritualist hasn't touched a job career. We had judges, we had, police, we had homemakers, we had, you name it. Like I'm loving, I'm going to actually have to look him up because I do remember hearing him, but I got even more information just listening to you. But it reminded me of a few different people like Peebles, James Peebles. He was also a universalist. We do have a lot of in our earlier pioneer days, because again, remember, we weren't a religion. So we have a lot of those like universalist, Unitarian,
Mhm.
like people who were ministers there and added spiritualism to their cause. A few like Moses Hall, he was a Seventh-day Adventist. They still talk about how bad he was. The Adventists did. Of course, spiritualism welcomed him, but yeah, and talk about like down from the poor to the rich, there was a spiritualist. There probably wasn't a home in any small town where a seance didn't occur.
Oh, wow.
Because they were
Uh-huh.
saying, and I don't know the historical facts again, right? We really didn't become a religion until like 1893. Well, 1893 is when we became organized, and we started to form like the National Spiritualist Association, right? So there was like a big umbrella for all of the US and stuff. But before all of that, before we organized and before we became like a religion where we had, were able to credential and ordain ministers, we had just the biggest diverse group of individuals looking for always that progressive change or that acknowledgement of, I get it, you like that doctrine, you like that creed, that's fine, but think about this or add this, or what do you want to do with this? And history to me is profound in the spiritualist movement, and I think every year we uncover more and more and more, because all of a sudden, we had that great aunt who got together with those other people, and
Yes, it
you
comes
know
out. Yes.
it's coming out of their journals now, because great aunt Gertrude has been gone all those years, so now let's dig into her dirt. And I can only imagine the mediums that we'll never know about because nothing was documented. But
Mhm.
I really don't think that there is a community that spiritualists have not been a part of.
Wow. That is saying something. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm Let me see. Well, let me just shift gears a bit.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier angels. Um, what are your beliefs or your views about spirits that have not been human beings? Do you ever
Sure.
encounter those? And what, like, how does that work?
Oh, Pandora's box. Let's open
Yes,
it, right?
yes,
Let's open
indeed.
it. Let's open it. When, for modern spiritualism and for my training, right? For the purpose of my training in the religion, science, philosophy of modern spiritualism is really to prove that continuity. And to prove that continuity, we need to connect you with someone, a loved one that you might have known who has crossed over, or a relative who maybe you didn't know, but you could go check, right? And go get information on.
An
That's one,
ancestor. Yeah.
yeah, an ancestor. That's one form of mediumship. Now, think about this. I'm going to digress. I'm going to give you a little bit of mediumship education first before I answer this entire question. If you think back to the beginning of the movement, right? You're talking 1850s, 60s, 70s, mediums were, giving messages at, home circles, basically. People would just meet at, in somebody's home. They'd sit around a table. The medium would say, okay, Vincent, I have your son here, or whoever it was, right? Like, and connect and give information. He's saying he was this tall. He's saying he's sorry he didn't get to see this monogrammed hanky that you made him, whatever some of those things are. Now, a lot of the naysayers of mediumship would say, yeah, but they just took advantage of, or, they what? They Google search somebody in 1858? They what? Got an obituary out of a paper, because those took how long to make? And if you even had money to buy them, like, you have to go back to the roots of mediumship. Like, oh, these girls, they just cracked their toes. Really? Where
I've,
they
I've
cracked
always
their
thought that
toes?
was the most ludicrous explanation. I realize for many reasons, at least one of them stated that and later recanted it and then recanted the recantation. And there was a lot of pressures involved. But
Well,
nobody
you're
does that with their toes.
you're
Okay.
you're exactly right. And not only that, like the naysayers will say, oh, they became alcoholics and this and that. But again, can you imagine just for a moment? And I know, Vincent, you're male. identify as male, I'm sure, right? I identify as
Yes, yes,
male,
I'm a man.
right? But can you imagine 1850, 1860? You're all but 16, or well, 1848, 1850, they might have been 16, 17 years old. Females stripped down, stripped of their clothes in front of tons of males to prove that they weren't cracking their toes, to then be called frauds, fakes, phonies, thrown under the bus by some of the people that they thought cared about them the most. I mean, can you imagine that? You don't think you might turn to a drink?
Oh yes, it's a terrible traumatic
they
experience
were
that,
they were
you know.
also like, it's proven that their dad was an alcoholic, which we now know through science is passed down, right,
Mhm.
in
There is a
DNA.
genetic component, absolutely.
Yeah, so like, to me, I get it. Like, I get some of the naysaying because I'm also very aware there are frauds. Sure. I
Yes,
don't think I don't think Harry Houdini was that awful of a person. I mean, I think he got on a vendetta and he took things a little too far, but he also did spiritualism a favor by exposing some of the frauds. Because just like any career, you have good and you have bad. And all a piece of paper will do is give you permission to practice. It doesn't matter if you practice good or bad. And those are some things that are important just to realize about that, about, food for thought. But back to your question. So mediumship is connecting to the spiritual realm and all that live there. I think we would be naive, ignorant, in my personal opinion, to believe that other energy, other I don't, I mean, I use the word entities because that's what people say, but I think other souls don't exist. Are we that ignorant and stuck up that we think we're the only people? Like,
yeah, exactly. That would make no sense to me.
right?
You know,
So,
it's only Homo sapiens on Earth we're the whole shebang. You know, no, that I don't find that very convincing at all. Quite the opposite. You know.
right. So I think that there's a huge world out there in the spiritual realm. It's that if you call that heaven, the other side, Summerland, Nirvana, whatever you call it, I think you would be ignorant to think that there's only people who look and talk like you. Like, I think we're going to have now spiritualism in the sense of the science, philosophy, and religion. Like, me as a spiritualist, the proof of continuity is important. And that's one form of mediumship. But there's also mediumship, that big umbrella, is connecting to the unseen world, the spiritual world. So, of course, there's going to be angels. I mean, what's the definition of an alien? Something foreign that you don't understand. So, again, sure, sure. I don't really know what's there. I don't think we'll ever really know. The only thing I do know is that there's a there. And I know that my loved ones I will see again, and I will see all matters of spiritual beings when I cross over. And why not be able to communicate with them while I'm here?
Absolutely. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, I guess one question that I would have, and I would like to ask is, how do you identify the identity of the spirits that you come in contact with? And
Sure.
can they lie to you? What are your how does that work?
So let me first say this. I don't necessarily, I am not naive to say that there isn't lower vibrational energy and higher vibrational energy. Some will call evil and holy, right? Going back to your upbringing, right?
Yes,
There's a
yes.
lot of that. Oh my God, evil, bad,
Mhm.
demons, unholy, pure fakers, liars, whatever, cheaters. And then you have angels, right? Superior beings, right? It goes from one extreme to the other. So when I connect to spirit, And I use spirit in a broad sense. If it's a loved one of my own, if it's a loved one for you, if it's a guide or a teacher, because I believe a lot in guides and teachers, an angel for some. I want to, first of all, only attract what's higher or better for me. I do not want to deal with low line energy. And, some people will say prayer of protection before they open their senses to the spirit world, and that's fine. I try to live a very high vibrational spiritual life. Not easy in this physical world, by the way, and I have not mastered it by any means, but I always have the mindset that I am only attracting the highest and best for myself and for the people I serve. So if I'm working with you, maybe bringing in your people, I am only asking for the highest and the best. So if there's a loved one who you don't want to speak to, most of the time, and I say 99.9% of the time, I won't ever get in contact with that individual. Because I'm working from, we always talk about mediumship being about frequency and vibration. So we have to raise our vibration to connect to spirit because they don't have the physical body holding them down anymore. Do you know how dense our physical world is in a vibratory rate?
Probably very much so. Probably very heavy.
Right. It is probably very heavy and dense, right?
Mhm.
And we have to raise our vibrations. That kind of means alter our state of consciousness, kind of move past the physicalness into the spirituality. And they have to bring down their vibration so we can meet, so we can have a conversation. And they have helpers on their side that help them do that. And we have us on our side, each other, helping each other to do that. So we make connection that way. And it is not like a conversation like you and I are having right now, where
Okay.
you can, hear me. Sometimes it is like the more you develop, the more you unfold your mediumship, it can be. But in the very beginnings, it can be a simple sign or a symbol or a coincidence. How many people have just lost someone they love so bad and they miss them so much that all of a sudden their song comes on the radio, an old
That's
tune
easy.
from long ago, or a cardinal or a bird shows up at the window and starts acting funny, or they start noticing like the number sequence of their loved one's birthday.
Oh,
That
all things that people have mentioned countless times. I mean, these things
countless.
happen. Yes.
That's connection. you know there we're living, remember, right back to our beginning of our conversation, we're living kind of with the mindset that they're separate from us, that they're far, far, far away, dimensions away, so far. Like, I was so disappointed the first time I flew in a plane and realized heaven wasn't above the clouds. Like, I'm like, oh my God, is it farther away than that? Like, you know, but that's not true. That's not true. Like, it's right here, and it's just shifting our consciousness to that state, and learning how to communicate and accept that. And a lot of times, especially when we're knee deep in grief, like when we're just experiencing that loss, or we're lost ourselves because of everything that's happening in our lives, it might almost seem impossible as a form of communication, right? It might just seem like, yeah, that's crazy, I'm making it up. You know, I'm a pretty logical person, Vincent. You're going to find this out too, because I do believe in mental health too, right?
Mhm.
Like, I do believe I have a yes, I am spirit first, having a human experience, but I am very much in my human body. And my human body also has, you know, science behind it. So I think there's a balance between this idea of, making sure I'm good physically and making sure I'm good spiritually. And then not trying to do either one of these if I'm off balance, because that's where you start to hear the stories of like the lying or the cheating or the fear based, right? Like, it's fear
Mhm.
based. Oh my God, this ghost is stuck and it's so mean and it's so crazy, or oh my God, this and ah. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I'm also saying I'm not going to work with it. And I
Hmm.
try really hard. And I think part of my upbringing within that paranormal community taught me right away about that. It said, no, I'm not going to deal with anything that isn't serving the highest and best for myself and the people that I serve.
Wow, I think that is a really excellent answer. That kind of explains it. I think I see where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm thinking of the quote that's posted in the Spiritualist Church.
Oh, my favorite.
Yes, from and now I'm gonna blank on his name, but you know who I'm talking about.
Andrew Jackson Davis.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, indeed.
Yes.
Um, and just tell me a little bit about that.
So Andrew Jackson Davis was a great philosopher, free thinker of his time. He was never a spiritualist. I'm just going to say that. But he promoted, well, you might be interested, some fun facts about him. He was self-taught. He became a doctor. He also became a lawyer. He
Oh,
actually was pro-divorce. Now, this was actually pre 1848. This was before that, right? This was like 18, well, around that time too, 1848 too. But he was, again, kind of at that forefront of that community, that thought, right? He actually formed, I believe it's called like harmonialism or something like that, was
mhm.
his kind of a little bit more science based. But we look at him as a forerunner for our and he actually predicted the events of Hydeville. He would go into a trance-like state. He was turned on to mesmerism. If any of you are into, learning about hypnosis, right? Anton Mesmer, um, kind of the father of hypnosis. They talk about the animal magnetism. He would go into trance-like states and he would have guides talk to him, spiritual beings talk to him and give him a greater understanding. He predicted a few different things. He predicted almost like Nostradamus did too, like planes, right, flying in air. He also predicted, Andrew Jackson Davis also predicted the seventh planet. Well, is Pluto a planet now? I'm not sure. I have not kept up on my science, so I'm not sure.
I'm
But
a
there was
Pluto denier, so I believe that it'll be a planet for me forever. I
okay.
was raised on the 9 planets, and then somebody decided later that Pluto wasn't big enough,
Yeah,
so it's not really a planet. Well, it is to me.
it
So
is to
that's
be
just
it
my
is
2 cents. Yes.
it is to be too. But he was a great, he just really um had some amazing, he wrote tons of books too, so look him up, Andrew Jackson Davis. But in one of his connections to his spirit guide, Gillian, they were standing again, clairvoyantly, right? He's standing under a tree with Gillian, and Gillian hands him this staff, this magic staff. And Gillian says to Andrew, "Behold, here is thy magic staff. Walk with it, talk with it, lean on it, believe in it forever." And that magic staff said, "Under all circumstances, keep an even mind." And that's the quote, that under all circumstances, keep an even mind. Every time I say it, I just get goosebumps all over my body because I think that is the key to who we are. We're not meant to be these yes and no people. We're meant to be these people who open up our awareness to everything. The more sometimes I think we dive into the occult or to the mysticism or to the science, the pseudosciences, or, when we start to dive into that, the more we know, the less we really know. Isn't it true?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yes, that if you can keep an even mind when you're dealing with these things, you won't be led in the wrong directions that sometimes people are who get deep into the mysticism. When I was talking about Charles Murray Spear, I was talking about the most positive things he accomplished.
Sure.
He got drawn into some things where he was going to create a machine that the Spirit of God would live in and interact with us. And he didn't know anything about mechanics or electronics at all. And the machine never went anywhere. But I don't think that he was keeping an even mind either. He was kind of being dragged around hither and thither and not using any critical thinking, and not just the kind of common sense approach. Now, does this really make sense? Or is this maybe something that's coming from a different direction, or maybe even coming from within his own mind?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think is interesting, especially in this experience, right? In our human experience, we're both spirit and human at the same time. We need to live in balance with each other. We can't, I get it. Like for me, some people will say, wait, when you start to develop your mediumship, if you're really, when it's all you want to do. But you know what? We also have to live our life. We also have to do our soul's purpose in this lifetime. And that is being also very present in our human experience. So it is about balance. And just like you're saying too, like about that medium, I think about it like, we all going to make mistakes. We all probably have parts of our life that we'd like to just kind of erase from the history books,
Oh,
be like,
yes.
well, can we just highlight this part or this experience? And sadly, that's usually not the case of how it works, right? But
No.
if we can keep even and balanced as much as we can, we'll have more time of that. We'll have more time of that. Like, I definitely can't say no, but I can't say yes, but it feels good, or it is my truth. And it opens you up for allowing others to kind of have their truth. For me, I don't really, and I have a lot of talks, doing a lot of events or podcasts like this, or being out in public and demonstrating. I've had a lot of people come to me with their Bibles or their, sacred scripts that they think is sacred. And they're like, look you're the devil incarnate. And I think, okay, but like, let me open your book here to this page. We're all God's children. All. Doesn't say just your kind.
Yes, yes. There's a lot of exclusivism in a lot of movements and religions, most definitely,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, it's fascinating. This is so much fun. I just could talk for hours.
well, I'm gonna have to hold you to about 2 hours is about all I can do tonight.
Oh
But
my goodness, yes. Or whatever. I can always come back.
yes, I definitely want to have you back on. And there's a lot of uncovered ground, believe me. Um,
Yeah, we're
I
just scratching the surface.
yes, indeed. Let me just ask well, it's not, I was gonna say, let me just ask the dumb obvious question, but it's neither dumb nor obvious.
Right.
Um, do um do, do spiritualists believe in reincarnation?
Sure, sure. Here's the thing. What spiritualists believe and what spiritualism, in its completeness believes is one, there's a God. We do believe in a higher source of energy, power. We don't believe in like an anthropomorphic God, like, the old man sitting with his tablet checking
Yes.
our boxes. We
I
believe,
That's
yeah.
Santa. Okay, that's not God. Okay.
Yeah.
But and a lot of people will say, well, I don't believe in some old man who sits on a cloud. But when you start quizzing them about it, that's kind of what they do believe. Yes.
Yeah. When you start asking, it's he, like he's gendered, like God is a he. Well, how do you
that
like,
that
you
right
know,
there makes no sense. Yes. I kind of compare it to any being powerful enough and old enough to create a universe this vast and this ancient wouldn't be somebody we could relate to. It would be like a fruit fly having a full-on conversation with a fruit fly. Well, you can't, because they're not on that level. And that's how we
absolutely.
would be with God.
Absolutely. I love that metaphor. I'm totally probably going to steal that one a little bit.
Feel free. That's the way I look at it.
It's perfect. And we believe that life is continuous. That those are our two hardcore truths, right? And of course, thirdly, we believe in that idea of brotherhood, of just humankind, right? Of being of service to one another, of being love, of being, highest and best. Reincarnation, the big question. I don't really think it's taboo. Some people will say that it is. Here's what I believe, and here's what you'll find: the majority of spiritualists are reincarnationists. Because
Oh,
again, if we're continuous and we live forever, now there's a big word, forever. Your monkey mind, our human mind, cannot even understand, just like the fruit fly in God, right?
yes,
We
yes.
cannot understand the significance of forever, eternity. We can't. We have, we live our life on a timeline, don't we? I only
Oh,
have 2
yes.
hours tonight. I'll have you
Mhm.
back tomorrow. Today's Thursday, Friday, 2023, 2022, 6 a.m., 6 p.m. We function on time, but yet we know time is an illusion, right? We just know it.
Oh, yes. It's something we feel, but it goes on. We don't understand it.
Right.
How it really works.
Right. So the idea of reincarnating, right? If we live forever, how many carnations do we have? Is it one? Is it multitudes? Spiritualism doesn't know. It can't prove. It can't say, like, okay, well, Vincent, you've been around 48 times, and in those 48 times, you've done this, 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 and this, and this. We can have maybe glimpses or ideas of maybe where we've come from, because maybe something in our life, just we're so attracted to it, but there's no reason we should be, right? Or we remember a place we've never been to, but when we go there, it's like, I've been here before.
I that's and that I really like that because I have had some past life memories that are extremely intense that I know occurred. And I can't prove it. I don't even have documentation or anything, but as much as I know anything, I know that happened, you know?
Yes, and
And
there, and you just said, I don't mean to interrupt, but you
go
said
ahead.
something really important. You said, I know it's happened, but I can't prove it. And that's why you'll find in some of the spiritualist documents, we don't have a stance on reincarnation because we don't feel it can be scientifically proven yet.
Mhm.
And we can't say it doesn't happen.
Yes, yes.
Here's what we can do: I can prove to you by bringing in an ancestor, giving you their description, their characteristic, their job, the look of their house or their bedroom, things I wouldn't know, and I couldn't Google search, and I couldn't read their obit, right? If I bring you that information, I have proved the continuity of life. If I say, well, you were Sir Newton, Isaac Newton, in your past life, and this, and this, and you say, oh yeah, like I really like apples, and sitting under a tree, it doesn't really prove it, does it? Like, it might
Exactly,
prove it to
exactly.
you, but it doesn't prove it to the people around you witnessing it.
Yes.
And that's where you're going to find the big debate within spiritualism. Again, if we're only functioning on the evidential, the proof of continuity, we don't have a stance on reincarnation. But the majority of us are some form of reincarnationists. Like for me,
Mhm.
I also think if time doesn't exist, are we living multiple lives at multiple times?
That's that's a good question. That maybe they're next to each other instead of one after another. I don't know. I, I tell
Yeah.
I tell you that to me though is a beautiful way of looking at it. That I like the spiritualist idea of reincarnation better than the Buddhist idea of reincarnation, where you're a drop of water and you go back into the ocean. I don't want to go back in the ocean. I want to be me. I just want to do it again,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
repeatedly,
yeah,
and that makes more sense because I have memories of, and I was me, but I wasn't here. I was back
right,
there. And
right.
that is the idea that our identity goes on is an absolutely beautiful one to me.
Yeah, and a
You
piece
know,
of that identity. Like,
oh yes.
I get the idea of the drop in the ocean, and I kind of believe that at some point too, because I think at some point I might get tired of myself. I don't know, but I don't know. But that being said, I agree with you too in the essence of I have a really hard time, and this is just me personally. I have a really hard time having finite answers, especially when it comes to the afterlife. Oh, there's 7 planes of existence. Well, how? Prove it. Because what if there's 8, 9, and 10? Um, I hate finite answers. And what I can't stand about some reincarnation thought process is two different things I'll talk about. One is this idea that we keep coming back to Earth. Do you really think this is the only planet humans exist or souls reside? I mean, have you ever, all you have to do is watch a supernova and then you find out how many galaxies there are? And where does these ideas come from? Like these sci-fis, like Avatar and Star Trek and Star Wars. Like, come on, could that not be a possibility? Could Atlantis not be really real? I don't know. So I don't like finite. Like, why are you only coming back to Earth? You're only coming back to Earth as in the Salem witch trials, which let's face it, there's not that many people, or you're coming back like to Jesus's time, or you're coming back to like, Joan of Arc. Like I have not yet heard an intelligent and you're not going into the future. Like I'd rather have somebody go like, you know what? I was George Jetson in another life. Like then I might believe you, right? Like, or how do you know you've been here really 48 times? Right? Like
Yes,
how do you
you can't demonstrate that, it's
right? So
just,
those
it's something
fine
you feel deeply, but you can't prove it. No, you
right.
scientifically, no, you can't.
So those finite answers, of that type of what I call made for TV reincarnation, not really into that idea, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely into the idea of like what you're saying, exploring these ideas,
Mm-hmm.
right? Exploring these moments or experiences that can't be answered. Now, some people who are heavy reincarnationists, and if I tell and let me tell you, I have told people I haven't been a reincarnationist and I've almost been ostracized, right? Like, what do you mean? Like, of course there's reincarnation. Have you not read this book and that book? And what about this experience? And I said, yes, yes, yes. But here's my interesting fun fact is what if for a minute, remember that beautiful question you asked about spirit entities who might not have had a human experience? Or what about like how do we know if about guides or teachers or what of this? A lot of times you'll see these little kids. I've watched videos of these kids who know stuff that they shouldn't know, right?
Yes, yes.
Down to the point like if you put them in a room with 5 strangers, they'll pick out the 2 they were friends with in a past life. All of that information. What if a spirit was just there? What if they had an imaginary friend saying, "Oh my gosh, look at Stacy, there's Vincent." Like
Mhm.
Vincent and I rode the same bus to school, sat in the third seat every single and I'm saying this to you
Oh yes.
because as kids, we are wide open to spirit.
My daughter spoke very early, and like 1 year old, she could talk. And she said the most amazing things. They kind of petered out as they get older, like,
Mhm.
3 or 4, it doesn't happen anymore. But when she was very, very little, she would say things that were quite interesting.
Yeah.
She once told my wife, her mother, "You're my mother this time, but I was your mother last time." And the timeline lined up for that to make a lot of sense.
And how? And how? And this is what I say, and how? Is it a possibility that it's a fraction of ourselves? Is it a possibility that somebody's there standing there telling them that, talking to them continuously? Some of the worst things we've done to ourselves, or I shouldn't say we've done to ourselves, but maybe our parents, our teachers, is we took away the idea of imagination being fake, creativity of being made up. None
Mhm.
of it's real. You know, those are things that still flutter in our minds
Oh,
when we're
yes.
when we're trying to believe in mediumship,
Mhm.
when we're trying to develop mediumship. You know, those are all things. But like the fun fact too, I don't know if you knew this science wise, the soft spot in a baby's head, that you know where the plates haven't fused together yet,
Mhm.
that doesn't happen till about 7 or 8. And
Wow.
when you study some of these children who have these, like, you know, who they think were past life people, by the time they hit 7, 8, 9, like you said, 3, 4, they're being programmed by, oh, we're going to make up a story. I'm going to tell you a story. We're putting in this idea that their experience isn't real, it's not valid. And by the time their plate fuses, all that communication ceased to exist.
Mhm. That's a very interesting take on it. Um, because yes, that we've set up this in our consensus reality, we've set up this hard line, like a Berlin Wall between real and unreal.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is actually it's much more of a gray area that and I don't know where I'm getting the term from, but the imaginal is very much a thing that it's not as real as this table that I'm touching, that my computer's resting on, but it's not as imaginary or as fictional as, say, Star Trek. It's
Right.
somewhere in a gray area, and a lot goes on in that gray area that we make things become real and we make things not become real. And I, you take it from there, but I
You
think that
do
happens.
you think that's the even mind,
I
right?
do
That
now. Now that you said it, yeah, I hadn't thought of it before, but yes.
that space, right? That
Yes, exactly.
space. You know, and again, you're going to find your truth that resonates in your soul for you or that feels right for you. But God, I hope you never get so tight up in there that you can't see. Don't become the Berlin Wall. Don't become the wall. You know,
Exactly.
be the countries around it. At least have a broader sense. Because I agree with you. You know, I don't know. I can't. I've had too many, like you said, too many experiences. You've had yours. You're saying, like, those are your truths. And when anybody says to me, I got something really strange or weird, or I have to tell you something that is really odd, I'm like, oh my God, you're going to start speaking my language. What do you got? Like, tell me what you got. Cause I love it. You know, like I want to know more about it, you know, because again, the more I know, the less I know. But the more I am comfortable knowing that I'm eternal, that I'm spirit having a human experience, and each and every individual that I have met and yet met and may not meet until 10,000 years from now are all part of that same experience on some level is unbelievable to me. It's fascinating, it's comforting, it's everything that I want to be and I want to believe.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Um, just, and I'm not even really changing the subject, but what do you think about dreams?
Well, I think dreams can be the portal to the whole spiritual realm. You know, I think that, you know, and a lot of this, like mediumship, is being widely studied right now in the science and the brain activity, especially over in England. There's in Scotland, there's a gentleman by the name of Chris Conley who's doing some amazing research into, and even Yale University. I just partaked in a study from them to decide
Oh,
like how
wow.
much is our mind, right? Like our mind, and then how
Mhm.
much could be real spirituality, you know, and so much of our brain is yet to be discovered. Like
Oh, yes.
there's so
Yes.
much.
We don't know. We truly don't know who we are. And
No.
I think some people like you, have a better idea of who they are, but none of us fully get ourselves, which is quite a way to go through life,
Right,
but it
right,
is the human
right.
condition.
Right. But so for me, dreams, so like when I connect to spirit and when other mediums connect to spirit, they talk about an altered state of consciousness. They're talking about, moving from theta, beta, delta, like different brainwave patterns, right? And when we get out of our constant state, whatever, I can't remember what our like us actively working right now, as we're talking, we are very much in an active brainwave pattern. But when we start to relax, why does meditation relax our body? Why do visits occur right before we fall asleep or right when we're waking up or in our dreams? It's because the brain is kind of slowing down its human being and allowing us to be our spirit being. And when we can be more in our spirit brain pattern, the connections tend to happen stronger and better. So I think dreams can unlock and become a place of connection. Now, I think dreams are very symbolic, though, too, right? Like I had a reoccurring nightmare for years throughout my childhood. It was the same I mean, it seemed like weekly I'd be having this and I'd wake up in a panic, like, like, those kinds of things. And
Do you
um
mind if I ask kind of what was the storyline?
sure. So for some reason I was driving like my little Delta 88, like, ooh, and I saw on the side of the road a person, like a woman, young woman, like screaming for help, like I need help, and they looked beaten and battered. So I pulled over and they took me. There was like, how a road goes over and there's like a river underneath. It's not really I guess you'd call it a bridge, but it's not like looking
Sure.
like a bridge, right? Not
Yeah.
like a
Yes, I guess what you're talking about.
yeah. And I would get out and I'd go, and she's like, help, help, help my friend. And I get pulled down into the ditch and kind of under the bridge. And there was no friend. And then I was being attacked. So, and usually as soon as I was being attacked, I woke up.
Wow.
Right. And it was very vivid and very real and very interesting to me to be having that like over. And I always felt like I was an observer, even though it woke me up. And interesting enough, as I started to kind of peel back and get to know myself a little bit more, right, and really dig into my spirituality, I realized the last time I had that dream was probably 20 years ago, but it was actually me. I was the bloody one asking for help.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't me in the car. It was really a weird kind of dream, but it
Mhm.
but it happened during a lot of my development. And I
Mhm.
realized that I was, like how they can say we're our own worst critics. We
Oh,
really can be
yes.
our worst enemies. We really
Mhm.
can. And that was an experience that way. Now, on the other hand, I have had numerous dreams. I don't call them dreams though. I call them visits with my little grandma who's in heaven. Like I literally will dream, quote, dream. I'll go to her house in heaven and we sit and we talk and we catch up. And I'll even sometimes wake up with tears coming down my eyes because it was so real. And then there's days I fall asleep with the TV, wake up and think I can predict everything because the news was on when I was sleeping.
There are mundane dreams, of course.
There are. So not every dream is profound,
Mm.
but but some can very well be, and it can be the portal to communication for you when you can get your mind to alter its patterns. It opens that space for connectivity.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll share a personal experience.
Please.
The one time in my life that I have interacted personally with someone who was deceased happened in a dream. And it happened in a very intense dream, unlike anything I've ever had before or since. He had recently died, and this was not a family member and certainly not a loved one. this was actually a guy I did not get along with. Um, I lived in a kind of a rough neighborhood, and I, without any insult intended, he was a criminal. I mean, he was, and he died violently. And it was said to be a suicide, but I've always believed that one of his fellow gang members murdered him. And he had only been he had departed within a day or two, as I recall. And I had this intense dream that he and I were together right in the area where we lived. And he wasn't the age he was when he died. He was, I remembered him from the area when he was much younger. And we were embracing each other. And I couldn't hear what he was saying. I could only hear myself saying, "It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay," like repetitively. And I felt like the animosity that we had was squashed. And I have never spoken ill of that person after that. And I felt like his soul reached out to mine before he went where whatever his next step was. And
Yeah.
that was a real thing that happened, and not a product of just my brain.
Right.
I'm talking about it now, and I'm relatively calm. When I talked about it in therapy, I broke down crying because it was that intense. It was
Yeah.
that intense.
Yeah.
And I believe that was a real encounter,
Absolutely. I have goosebumps all the way to the tip of my fingers and the tip of my toes, because to me that was an encounter, and it was so many times we get wrapped up in our ownness, right? It's just how we are, right? I get
Mhm.
it in this experience. But he needed, you needed, and he needed, and who knows who else needed
And that's
that
true too.
experience to happen, that visit, that profound connection to happen to both of you. It altered who you are,
Oh
and it
yes,
altered who he was. And how
I believe
amazing
that.
is that? And
Yes.
that's it. It resonates. I feel the warmth in my heart, because to me, you were in that correct state. Only you know you, right? And I say this to everybody because there's a lot of things that we self-talk, that we know inside or we feel inside, that we never verbalize outside, right? Like, sometimes our fear of talking to the quote unquote dead can be so deep rooted in us that even when we feel like we've pulled it, it still can fester and grow back,
Oh
you
yes.
know? And so it's not sometimes as simple as, oh yeah, I believe so I can make it happen. It's a self-discovery process. And having that dream, I can't even call it a dream for you, because it's an experience. It was a visit. It was two souls meeting for that moment to bring on whatever it needed, not just for the two of you individual souls, but for everyone around you. Who, Vincent, I don't know how many times you've shared that story, or to who you've shared it to, but what if they had that profound experience from hearing your story, that they accepted theirs and they turned around and changed this? We just don't realize how connected we truly all are. And that's where I love the fact when people say to me, I got to tell you about this dream I had. I always go, yep, bring it.
I,
Bring it, because
I bet you hear some really interesting ones.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating.
And just talking about that particular encounter, that's something I've found very attractive about spiritualism, is the idea that it's not, you don't die and it's judgment day.
Right.
You can go on as a spirit and get wiser and make better decisions and decide, I want to be a better person, even though I'm not in a physical body right now. And that's a lot better than now you're going, you're going for sentencing because of the stuff you did while you were alive.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times, if you look at the bigger picture, even evil people, if you really know all their circumstances, it's not as simple as I get up in the morning and eat an extra bowl of evil flakes and go out and do evil for the sake of evil. There's
Right.
usually, and I've worked, a while in the criminal, I won't even call it the criminal justice system, the legal system.
Yeah.
And usually you don't find, I've known a few people that, yes, I felt were actually evil,
Sure.
real evil, but they were a small minority. Most people were just desperate in a bad situation, facing a lot of bad options, and they did something that they wouldn't have chosen to do if it wasn't for all the other circumstances in their life. And
Yeah.
that might sound, you know, I don't care how it sounds. It can sound bleeding heart if you wish, but it people are often, their actions don't reflect who they really are. They reflect the
Right.
circumstances they're in.
Yeah.
And I love
Well,
the idea that you could post moving on, but try to overcome that and try to
yeah.
become a better person. That's a beautiful idea to me.
Well, and that's, I don't know, to us, that's how we just believe. We believe in this. We don't believe in vicarious atonement either. We don't believe
Mhm.
like, oh, well, just say you're sorry and all is forgiven. We believe that everything is an act of, law of cause and effect. And I am like you in my beliefs. You don't understand what somebody else is going through. And until you're in their shoes, which you'll never be because we all wear individual shoes, you can't judge and jury someone just because you might not do that situation. First of all, you're never in the situation to begin with. You don't know how you're going to respond. And spiritualism brings through in its principles, because it has these 9 principles, and these principles were like human made but maybe inspired by spirit, like inspired by our bigger understanding. One of them is the doorway to reformation is never closed against any soul. So no one is damned to eternal hell. No one is, that we just that doesn't even seem right. How can you talk
That
about a
that was the break
God?
that was the breaking point for me on Christianity. I just could
Yeah,
not accept that doctrine because it's like, okay, you say forever, and as you said, we throw that term around forever like it only means maybe 20 years.
or
No,
10,000, but even
yes,
that we don't
yes.
understand.
And it's like, okay, whatever this person did, you don't think 10 billion years pays for it? Because that's only a
Yeah.
scratch of the surface of forever. True
Yeah.
eternity is way more than 10 billion years. And I'm like, no, I can't accept a God that would send anybody to that for anything. Anything. No,
Right.
it's not. No, that makes no sense to me at all. It doesn't resonate in the least. And that
No,
was
and
the breaking point for me.
And not only that, and then we have principle number 7, which is this idea of personal responsibility, that we can make our own happiness or unhappiness by the choices we make, right? Now, that being said, we all make bad choices. Like I said, we all have had moments in our life where we would love to go back and rewind and cancel out. And even those that we feel like no one saw, the collective consciousness saw, right? So it's not like you can go, oh, no one saw that. So it's okay. you know, but then we have to personally take responsibility and fix and atone ourselves, not outside of ourselves, but internally in ourselves. And that's what I love about this forever, right? This idea of like, I know I'm eternal and I have forever. Like, doesn't give you an excuse. See, now here's the other thing, going back to our reincarnation talk, because I hear this sometimes and it irks me. It's like nails on a chalkboard. Well, I guess if I don't learn how to do it this lifetime, I'll just figure it out the next. No, that's an excuse.
Yes, yes, yes.
No, you
You're
have to
just putting it off
try.
for tomorrow. Yes.
But like you said, and now you're even bringing me back to that conversation of that medium who was the probation officer, because in a way, he was saying like, let me help guide them to be responsible for their life. Like either learn how to deal with maybe making better choices or giving them the love maybe they didn't receive because they were always told they were going to be a screw up. And they believe that because thoughts are things. And, so yes, like, oh, I don't know. That's profound. Now I'm going to be deep in thought all night about that because that's just like, that's the part that I love. Like, I love the fact that I have full control over my happiness and my unhappiness by the choices I make. Sometimes a hard pill to swallow though, right? Because there's our days that I want to blame people for not using their blinker on the interstate. Like just use it, please, but the
I
only
don't think driving brings out the best in anybody. Okay.
but the only thing that we can really do is control ourselves, right? So that's what I love about this too. And that's what everything has taught me about through mediumship and connecting people to their loved ones, kind of what the afterlife is.
That's
You
very
know,
interesting. Yes.
that they talk about that idea of reforming and changing and growing. So I say, all right, bring it.
Yes. Right on. Just to shift a little bit.
Sure.
We had been talking about why would we only come back as human? There would probably be many other options, and maybe we go and live on different worlds. I don't know how familiar you are because I'm not even that familiar with it, and I don't know. But the UFO phenomena
Mm,
didn't start with people seeing things in the sky. It A lot of it started through spiritualism, and a lot of, and I use the word entities, appeared at spiritualist seances, gatherings, and that was before the 40s when people started seeing, disc-shaped craft. And
right.
there were a lot of, there were a lot of connections there, and a lot of beings introduced themselves as being from another planet. And that, you know, was something that happened repeatedly. And
Mm,
I'm thinking of Emanuel Swedenborg
yeah.
and the spirits who came from Mars, came from Jupiter, came from Venus, and talked with him.
Mm,
And I I take that seriously. I think that that could very well happen, and that they might not even have bodies physically necessarily, but they still reside in a certain area and come and visit the neighbors.
mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, and I think, again, I think you have to look at semantics of words. Like the definition, I remember somebody telling me once the definition of alien, like or how it came to be, like what Latin or I don't know, like, the idea, the phonetics of the word
Oh yes, yes.
alien.
Entomology, I think, is the word
Yeah,
they're. Yeah.
that's it. It's that idea of something foreign that we don't understand. So everything is alien in a way that, anything can be alien if we don't understand it. And even
Well, that's
before,
what we call people who come across the border without
right?
permission. We call them aliens.
Right.
Yes, even though they're obviously human beings, exactly the same as us, but that's what
Right.
the term means. Yes.
Yeah, and I think, like for me anyways, like what you're talking, I mean, if we even go back to beginning of man and you look at some of the hieroglyphics, and it's always some sort of big phenomenon that's outside of the traditional norm that is being lived in, some sort of entity, energy, spirit coming through and bringing this information, this visions, whatever it is. I think you would, again, I have to plead, like, you might have to be ignorant. I don't know if they come in forms of a UFO, or how, if they travel by horse or Pegasus, or I don't know, but I know that we would be ignorant to believe that there isn't all of these other forces or souls. Like I call them just souls because they're intelligent energy, right? No matter
Yes,
how they come
yes.
to us. For me, sometimes it's teachers or guides. Some people will call like, oh, I don't know, and I don't know anything about this. So please, again, I can plead that I don't have the knowledge of like the Metatron and different galactical beings. Listen, I think it might all be possible. I really
Oh
do. I
yes.
can't say that it's not, because to me, it's again information that's being given to us for betterment of ourselves or humanity. So I'm pretty sure I want that. Like I want anything that's going to make me and my neighbor better people. So I can't deny, because I just don't know. Like I haven't had my own personal encounter per se, like maybe like in the study of like Area 51 and those. But see, what I find interesting, Vincent, let me tell you this too, is we get stuck on this idea that we can only look human because it's all we know. But what if we could look tree or dog or foreign? We talk about the etheric body. What does our soul really look like? Do you really think it looks like your meat suit? Like, do you really think your energy, your essence of who you are is this? Because I'm telling you, I'm coming back thinner and younger then, like if I can for my kids. Well, just like you said in your visit, like let's tie this all together.
Mhm.
Like you had said with your visit with your well, I'm going to call them a friend because
We
you made
ended as friends, yes.
came back looking younger, right? Well,
Yeah.
of course, because it doesn't have to be stuck in what it has been stuck in for those years of the human experience. And when you talk about like astral projection or etheric body, it might look kind of like the form of a human body, but it might just be like a blob of color or moving energy. It's kind of like that idea of, okay, well, what does God look like?
Yes.
You
Whatever
know?
whatever God cares to look like, but that's just a presentation for us. Actually, nothing we could imagine. You know,
Right.
we could not
Right.
handle that experience. We're the fruit fly. We're not up for that.
Well, and then you think about all of these people, thousands, tens of, I don't even know because I don't study this particular, you know, um, alien forms, but when tens or hundreds of thousands of people are having the same experience, I can't just say, oh no, that's just not, there's just no possibility. No, that's all fake. I can't do it.
Exactly. I was just reading something today about Fermat's paradox, where
Mm,
they said there's so many planets in the universe. If there's aliens, well, why haven't they come here? And I'm thinking they have come here. People have talked to them countless times. They just haven't gone through the proper channels.
yeah,
Okay. They
yeah,
haven't come here in the way that you'd accept them. They've
right,
appeared to some farmer in rural Wisconsin and gave him pancakes, but they haven't showed up at the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Well, they're not going to. They don't
right,
necessarily want to talk to the people in charge. They want to talk
right,
to the people.
right.
And without saying that they're necessarily extraterrestrial at all. They could
Yeah.
be from here. It's wide open. They could be from a
It
lot of
is. It
places.
is so wide open. It's
Yes.
these are boxes, like I want to talk about Pandora's box. These are boxes that we could go down and up and sideways through rabbit holes, but I can't discount them and just say, oh, absolutely not. It's
Oh
ridiculous. Like I
no,
can't do that.
exactly. I
I can't.
totally accept that people have had these experiences around the world for a long time. In fact, pretty much forever. If you look at
Yeah.
the folklore and you look at the cave paintings and you look at everything, people have been having these experiences from as far back as we can go to today. Somebody's had an
Yeah.
experience like that today, and no, why haven't they come here? Well, apparently they have over and over
Right.
and
They
over.
just haven't come there in the way you want them to. That's the problem with our world,
Exactly,
is
exactly.
everything wanting it done only your way or this particular way, and that's why, even in spiritualism, we're so put into the occult, uh, you know, uh, mythical, magical type of arena, or they'll call like, mediumship super, no, super normal or paranormal. To me, it's just normal. It just makes sense. It's just a form of communication. That's all. It's just a language. It's a language of energy to energy. That's the difference between psychic and mediumship too. Those are two entirely, I shouldn't say entirely different, but they're two different energetic communication styles. Not all psychics are mediums. All
Okay.
mediums will be psychic, because you have to be able to tune into energy. So like psychic energy is your energy, my energy. It's like earth energy. Like I can connect to your aura, your energy. I can connect to the energy of my house, your house. I can connect to the energy of nature. I can connect to, the energy of my neighbor. Like all those kinds of, like, it's psychic work can be very draining on one's physical body because you're using your own energy to connect to some other physical energy, animals, whatever it is. So that's psychic work. Mediumistic work is my energy connecting to spirit energy, which is in that spiritual realm of life, of living. And so that doesn't make one very exhausted. It actually kind of gives you a buzz, to be honest, because you had to raise your vibration. Like we said in the past, they need to lower theirs. We connect and we kind of get a little bit of a buzz from that. Psychic energy, especially when you're doing it all the time, like it's very draining because you're using your own physical energy, where in mediumship I'm using my spiritual energy, and that's completely different.
You're tapping into something higher that's kind of like, plugging in the phone charger, you might say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That makes a
exactly.
lot of sense.
Yeah, like
Wow.
psychic work is actually flipping the light switch up and down to
Mhm.
turn the lights on, but mediumistic work is actually the electric current that that is unseeable to the human eye to actually turn things on. So it's important to kind of know the difference too, I think, at least, again, I think there's so much misinformation
And
out there.
I wanted to give you a chance to do that to what are the biggest misconceptions about spiritualism and mediumship?
Sure, sure. I think one is in spiritualism, they think that we're some sort of, I don't know, like worshiper of I don't, I've heard so many bad things. It's like negative. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, you're
Oh,
talking
you
evil
believe me,
entities,
I've
dark,
heard many that, yeah.
dark nature. It's like that's so not the point. When I believe in a God, I do. Like call it whatever. We call it, in spiritualism we call it infinite intelligence because we try to get away from the idea of God as a human form, anthropomorphic form. Infinite spirit, whatever. Like use whatever title you need. So one, I believe in that. Two, I believe in communication with those living in the spiritual world, with those, like we even say in our principle, the so-called dead. Do you know what? I think spirit is living more than we are. My grandmother is living a way better life and is truly living than me just getting through the dailies.
That makes a lot
Um,
of sense.
so
And
I don't know what's evil about that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like,
I have to tell you, my first impression upon setting foot in the Spiritualist Church in West Dallas was, oh, these are very normal people. These are, down to earth. These are good people. I can just, you know, these aren't 12 dudes in robes chanting at midnight in a cave. That would have freaked me out. Okay.
or we're not wearing aluminum foil on our heads, or
No. And this is very, this is very positive,
yeah,
and the Christmas music, which was more like secular Christmas music. I don't
yeah,
mean that in a bad way. I mean it was happy, and
yeah,
it was good, and it was, joyful.
yeah.
And the people there were normal people that I would meet on the street and have no problem having a cup of coffee with. And that's not always how it's portrayed, you know.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And we're portrayed as, kind of this secret, society doing things that, doing things that go bump in the night. No, I talk to my grandma all times during the day. I don't need a special time. I don't need nighttime. I don't need November 1st because the veil's thinner. Nope. I just do that. It's just normal. Do you know what I mean? I try to feel like all I'm trying to do is be a good person in this experience and be connected to every person I come in contact with and those people who are still very much alive on the spiritual realm. And I think that you should really and my other thing that I just want to promote is education. Just education. Here's the thing, there is no one is perfect. No one. Not one person is perfect. Everyone comes with their own baggage, if you would. Jesus came with his own baggage. Everyone comes with their baggage. Buddha came with his baggage. He left his wife and child, and like we all are. We're just doing the best we can, right? And
Yes, yes.
and to have that awareness, you don't got to believe it, but educate yourself. Don't just go because somebody told you, well, this is evil. Then you just say, well, it's evil. Do some research. Don't just Wikipedia it. Kind of dive into it a little bit. Just kind of going back to, full circle into our conversation. Like when we were first talking and starting to talk about all of this, it was kind of learning to embrace everything and nothing all at the same time. Have that open mind. Listen, if you do the research and you still believe what you believe, by all means believe it, but don't do harm. And don't force others. Don't force your beliefs on others. That's spiritualism doesn't do that. We don't like throw you into a seance and open you up and curse you with these people. That it's no, it has nothing to do with that. It has just this idea of coming together, feeling the oneness, the connection, remembering that separation is just an illusion, and spending that time with each other in a space that's loving and caring.
And that's something I really appreciated. Nobody tried to recruit me. And
No.
you go to a lot of churches, they're not letting you out the door without getting your contact info and make sure we can draw you back next week. And everybody was just real chill.
Yeah.
Have a good day. And if you come back, you come back. If you don't, you don't. That's cool.
One of spiritualism's mottos is that we are not a religion of conversion, but a religion of conviction. So we will either try through mediumship to prove to you that you're continuous, and whatever you do with that information after that is yours to do with, and we'll be there if you need us. Like we're not one, like you said, okay, can I have all that? We're just like,
And like there was just no pressure applied, and that was very nice.
yeah.
And even when, and I have no problem talking about it. You gave me a message, and it was a very powerful message. And you still gave the caveat, this is what your ancestor is saying, but you can do whatever you want. Nobody's commanded to do anything. You can choose to follow this, or you can choose to ball it up and throw it over your shoulder. And that's your decision. And
Yeah.
you don't find a lot of that in religion. You don't find much of that at all.
No. Hence the reason I think I fell in love with and converted to, if you would, and became a spiritualist, because it resonates with my soul.
That is the best of reasons, is it not? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my
I
gosh, this was so much fun.
Yes, I've got many more questions,
Okay.
but we've probably got to wrap things up in the next few minutes.
Yeah.
And maybe we should just end on that note.
Yes.
Because I think you really broke things down extremely well. And I'd like to leave our listeners with this, and this will not, hopefully, not be your only appearance, because I'd really love to have you back on the show.
I would love it. Yes, please.
Great.
Absolutely.
Well, folks, this has been The Weird Part. I am your host, Vincent Truewell. My very special guest has been Stacy Schuerman, spiritualist minister, medium, healer, and teacher. I will have links in the show notes. And I'd like to thank you, Stacy, for being with us tonight. And hopefully see you back here soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vincent.
Thanks for listening, and good night.